Welcome to the Detox and Nutrition Coach Podcast. The following is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Please seek the advice of a healthcare professional before changing your health program or embarking on a new one. And now, the man that simplifies the complex, your host, Dr. J. Davidson.
I'm with Jordan Rubin, huge mentor. I remember reading your book, 2006. Well, somebody gave me a bottle, and they're like, try these probiotics. And I'm like, what are these? And they're like, well, you should read this book. And then they gave me a book, and I read it, and it's still on my shelf today. So this is Jordan Rubin. He wrote The Maker's Diet. And how many other books now?
We just completed our 27th.
27. So New York Times bestselling author. You started the company Garden of Life, which is a household name in the health world, health food stores, and all over the place. You started an organic food. Well, really, I mean, the company's name states it, Beyond Organic, Beyond Organic Food Company. And now you've got another company that you're part of and co-founded called Ancient Nutrition. So mover and shaker, just been a huge influence for millions of people previously with everything you've done, Maker's Diet, and then currently now, I mean, it just huge impact. So I'm so excited that I can take time to pick your brain today.
Thanks for having me. Pick away.
So start off for our listeners. I mean, so you have been in the health space maybe 20 years roughly?
Yes. Hard to believe, but yes.
Yeah, and you've seen behind the scenes of things that probably most people haven't seen, and you've had your own health journey. So, I mean, where did you getting into health start from?
Well, I was raised in a chiropractic and naturopathic home, and so my influence of natural health was always there. I may not have had an appreciation of it. When you're a kid, you just try to get junk food wherever you can, and I didn't learn the principles. And I know that now because when I was a kid, I was trying to eat junk. My children today would absolutely not touch it. So there's a difference between being around the principles and learning and internalizing them. But oftentimes the Bible says you train a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they'll not depart. So I did come back, but I came back in crisis. I was deathly ill at the age of 19. Maybe it was because of an ill-advised vaccine at 16. Maybe it was because of the foolish, low-fat, high-carb diet I went on, high stress as a freshman in college. There's a lot of reasons why inherited weaknesses become disasters, but my health was a wreck. I was trapped in a prison that was my own body. Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue, diabetes, parasitic, bacterial, fungal, viral infections, 104 pounds in a wheelchair, 69 medical experts, conventional natural cures failed, until I met a man who told me if I eat a diet and live a lifestyle based on the Bible, proven through history and confirmed by science, I can be well. And while I had some faith, this gave me hope, because I didn't just see my results. I saw a platform to share with the world. After I was sick for a year and a half, 2 years, I knew I wasn't the only one. There were others suffering, and what if this was my purpose? To get sick, get well, go from mess to messenger. And I've held that with me for the last 20 plus years. So approximately July of my 21st birthday, and so I'm now 41, I was off medication, back to my old weight again. What I now call the after picture really launched me. And I can't believe it's been 20 years, but it's been an amazing journey, and I've been able to share this message not just with one person as I hoped I would, and I made that commitment. If I can help one person overcome disease, or better yet, avoid it, then this whole living hell would have been worth it. But I've been able to help others. And now, as developing that elder statesman position, I'm meeting people and able to impart this information and truth into their lives, such as yourself, and you share with others. And so it's really an awesome experience. But today, the need is great. The awareness is there. I mean, we're not in a weird space. People have heard of chiropractic. They've even heard of colonics. Detoxification isn't just important, it's cool now. So we are at the ultimate opportunity to get our message out there. The need's never been greater, the opportunity even more so.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many things I can pick your brain on. It's like, where do you even start? You wrote the foreword to my book, which, so I mean, we obviously go back a little bit, but you've had such an impact for myself, even back 2006, guiding from a dietary standpoint. and then the probiotic soil-based bacteria thing, and now all I'm hearing about now is bone broth. Bone broth, and I use bone broth fasting and bone broth with,
Absolutely.
patients and clients and utilize that. But now it's like you're online and people are raving about, you should try this bone broth protein and, check this out. So I have to start diving into the bone broth thing right away. When did this all come about? Like, where did the idea of bone broth protein, where did that get launched? Because you're so visionary.
Yeah, the idea was planted a long time ago. When I was ill, I worked with so many individuals who were doctors, who were nutritionists, who were healers, so to speak. And one of them was Elaine Gottschall. She wrote a book called Food and the Gut Reaction, which later became the Breaking the Vicious Cycle, known as the SCD diet, the specific carbohydrate diet. Elaine was a personal mentor of mine, and while her diet didn't help me get well, I learned the importance of bone broth and chicken soup. My Jewish grandmother told me the importance of bone broth or chicken soup. I started learning from an organization called the Price Pottinger Foundation, which later would become the Weston A. Price Foundation. They talked about bone broth. So I understood how good it was. And because I had IBD and people that came to me had gut issues, while most folks say juice cleansing is the way to start your health journey, I would find that was harsh for people. And so since my first book, Patient Heal Thyself, and certainly in the Maker's Diet, I told people, go on a broth cleanse. If you are absolutely sick and you can't eat anything else, consume only broth. And I would say make a chicken soup and you can puree it, etc. When I had children, one of the first foods I gave them, bone broth, pureed with vegetables and a little bit of meat. So I knew about it. But the challenge, Jay, that I had, which is similar to many great treatments, modalities, or foods, compliance was awful. Maybe the best food on the planet. In fact, almost everyone who tried bone broth or who eats it says, I feel satisfied and I feel strong and I don't feel sick. But the compliance was the opposite of through the roof, like in the pit. And really over the last 20 years, I think I've been kind of looking for opportunities to get broth into people's bodies. Now, you and I, I'm sure, and many others have been part of these Amish co-ops, or in my case, I started a farm and they'll sell bone broth in these little plastic containers. We were going to make bone broth as part of Beyond Organic, but just the scale was so difficult and how many bones we needed and how do we freeze it with it not cracking? Anyway, there was a lot of issues. And about a year ago today, I made an accidental discovery, just like every other discovery. Soil-based organisms came from my gut issues. Yep. Many other things have come from me going through immune system issues, but I had some knee issues that required me to get back to my roots. I started drinking bone broth copious amounts. I ended up trying to make it again, but when you're compromised, how do you do it? I mean, I was on crutches. And I couldn't have my wife, mother of 6, slaving over a pot, smelling up the whole house. You know how that goes. And so I began to make it and consume it, but when I made it batch, I was already due for my next one. Found a brand of frozen organic bone broth that just came into stores, $10 a bag, but well worth it. And I drank the equivalent of 6 cups a day. And in one instance, I was going to speak in Florida, and I just assumed this frozen bone broth would be at the health food store, because the packaged and in the stuff in cardboard it's not the same. Yeah. It's not the nutrients. And so I gave my mom a shopping list who lived in Florida. I said, I need 28 bags of frozen bone broth, please. And she said, there's none. And I said, well, I've been doing this. I don't want to give it up. Bone broth is good for the joints. It's good for the skin. And now it's become a bit of a fad with Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Salma Hayek, Gwyneth Paltrow, broth bars popping up instead of coffee shops. Finally, it's 5,000 years to become an overnight sensation. But I was actually working on some formulas, and this is so funny. I didn't share this from the stage at the conference I'm speaking at, but I was developing a protein from fish roe. Now, you might actually think this is cool. I found a source of fish eggs, which are totally separate, awesome subject. And in my mind, I could make this the next big protein. Yeah. But there were some obvious issues, such as palatability. And I actually used a powdered bone broth to try to flavor the fish eggs. And fish eggs, again, they're amazing, but it would have never worked. I couldn't flavor it no matter what I did. But I had this extra thing of broth. And so when I went to Florida, I grabbed it and I said, I don't have any choice. I'm going to bring this. I started mixing it in water, and worked the same as broth. And now I've known about bone broth for 20 years. I understand what it does. I even think I know what's in it. But I didn't put together what might be in the powder. Because, you got liquid bone broth, very small solids, they become powder. And I said to my team, you got to analyze this. And they came back, and I literally looked at this lab report, and I was floored. And I don't know why I didn't get this. Nearly 90% protein, which is one of the highest protein levels of any food, loaded with glucosamine, chondroitin, hyaluronic acid. These are some supplements people buy every day.
Yep.
Potassium and sodium in the ideal ratio. Glycine and proline, which are amino acids we're deficient in. And I immediately had a headline come in my head, Bone Broth Protein. How could we have missed this? And so I know that might seem like some extraordinary story. It's more typical for me, but I knew, Jay, a year ago that this would be the most important product I've ever been a part of. And now it's obviously many products, started a whole company, but I look for things that are missing in people's diets. And I would sit at seminars, at tables to sign books, and people ask questions. Jordan, what do I do for this? What about my kids that? What if I have this? And there's always a product that I think will work for 80% of the people. Maybe it's age specific, or maybe, you might detox from it. Yeah. I recommend bone broth protein to every human being alive. If I had it when my kids were born, or we have adopted children, when we brought them in our home, I would have saved hundreds of hours because I would have mixed bone broth protein in with pureed veggies instead of making it for 24 hours and freezing it and trying to bring it on airplanes, and the liquid thing didn't work. So I literally was caught when the whatever bombing happened, and I had 6 half-gallon jars of homemade formula and a bunch of frozen bone broth, and having it to throw it away. But anyway, and flash forward, bone broth protein is an indispensable tool in my personal wellness and in my toolbox for coaching others.
So when you traveled to Florida, you couldn't get the liquid, so you just took the powder, and you noticed that it still had that effect. What did you notice symptomatically, or what were you dealing with at the time?
Well, really, it's mobility and flexibility. I mean, it works incredibly well. And I know, because collagen's become a bit of a hot topic recently, that collagen, and really the makeup of it, the amino acids, especially if they are hydrolyzed, and you can do that through making a bone broth, they have an amazing effect on the joints, on the gut, and over time, certainly. I just noticed this morning, I can't believe I've got to cut my nails again. I mean, just the ability for the hair, the nails, and the skin to be improved. But in my case, it was mobility and flexibility. And let's face it, that's everybody, right? Yeah. I mean, I'd love to, I'm so critical of athletes. Like, how can you miss 6 games of the year, Adrian Peterson? You're supposed, and it's like, meanwhile, I play a pickup basketball game, and I need to be picked up off the ground. But and then I think about my kids who play sports, and we're giving them all these high protein foods that are rich in an amino acid called methionine, and good dairy products and good meat products and certain heirloom grains and seeds and nuts, but we are completely missing this broth. And I thought, what an opportunity for me to deal with my issue, but then help prevent the issue in others. And that's just the beginning. Understanding that glycine in bone broth helps the detoxification process. And there's a lot of dairy sensitive people. Dairy has glutathione precursors, but imagine if you can get it from bone broth, which fits with a paleo diet, a GAPS diet, a Maker's diet. I mean, it's allergen-free, dairy-free, gluten-free, paleo-friendly. So it literally has become the foundational product that I would say it's really a food disguised as a supplement.
I was going to say, I almost think of the bone broth protein as a food more than a supplement.
It really is. I mean, it is. But the way that this bone broth is made, not only does it allow it to capture maximum collagen type 2, chondroitin, glucosamine, more than homemade. We've tested it. That's crazy, but more than homemade. But there are people that are very sophisticated in nutrition that understand there's one drawback from bone broth, the sensitivities with glutamate and histamine. And we tell people to make broth for 24 hours, but the longer you do that, the early, let's say, a hydrolyzation of the amino acids over time frees up some of that glutamic acid, which has, just call it an MSG reaction in some people. The answer, according to Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, is when you're really sick, make shorter cooked bone broth. But we know it's not as good for the gut.
What would be a shorter time period?
They say a couple hours.
Okay.
But we've actually been able to make bone broth protein in a process that takes as little as 30 minutes. but due to the pressure and the heat, we're able to extract maximum compounds as if it was cooking for 24. And it's all done because of the process. Whereas when we're doing it in our home, and do I open the pot? Do I, close the pot? What's the heat? It's not an exact science, but we were able to perfect that so that we believe we can be consumed by the most sensitive individuals. And we were, I think, very intentional, even though the world wants vanilla and chocolate protein, which we have some great ones, believe it or not, who would think bone broth mixes there. We launched really the first savory protein. We have a pure, and it has one. How many products have one ingredient? Bone broth protein concentrate.
First jar I bought, I was like, there's no added ingredients?
There's nothing. And we added turmeric, which is awesome, organic turmeric. Yep. We have a greens where we add organic oatgrass and alfalfa grass juice. And then we got our flavors and our new products. But the simplicity is amazing, and the versatility. I would love to see people mix bone broth with juice in the morning, but who's going to mix 16 ounces of bone broth with 12 ounces of juice? That's like nastiness personified. Coffee. I think fiber is good to slow down absorption of things, but fiber can cause issues. There's almost no universal fiber that's good for everybody. But the collagen or gelatin that you find in bone broth can help slow down that caffeine. And so putting bone broth protein in coffee is amazing. You can never do that with broth. Here's one you'd probably like. I don't do a lot of grains, but I like colored or heirloom grains. I love black rice. So we were making it for the family. And instead of just using water to cook with or stock, and stock is, if you look at stock, it's just basically watered down, bouillon cubes. If you buy it, even organic. I put enough bone broth protein in the cooking water of the rice to allow for every family member to have between 15 and 20 grams of protein added to their rice. So now you're eating rice that's got 20 grams of carbs, 20 grams of protein, and all the kids said was, this is delicious. And this is really a little radical, but when you think of high protein diets, what are issues? What kind of conditions do people say you monitor your protein?
Well, for high protein, the big thing, because right now the hot buzz is ketogenic, ketosis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if you consume too much protein, that'll turn into sugar, gluconeogenesis.
Yep.
And on the other thing is too high a protein could damage your kidneys.
Absolutely. So most proteins out there are insoluble. And everybody thinks, well, there's plant protein and there's animal. No, there's muscle building protein, methionine rich protein, and then there's connective tissue protein. There's serum soluble proteins. See, I didn't know that bone broth had 8 grams of protein per 8 ounces. I just never thought about it. I didn't realize that when you made a chicken soup, the broth actually has more protein than the meat. I just thought it was protein sparing. I didn't know it was protein supplying. But here's what I will say, and I would never tell the general public to ignore their doctor's orders, but protein from bone broth behaves nothing like the other proteins. It will not be used as sugar in the gluconeogenesis process, and it will not damage your kidneys or your liver because it does not have methionine. It is full of glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. And two ways to describe it, Jay. This balances your protein intake. Think of your proteins from dairy and meat and eggs and grains like omega-6 fats, essential. And then bone broth proteins like omega-3s. You need the balance. And I think it's probably 75 muscle building, 25 connective tissue, or 50-50. So when you consume proteins from bone broth, whether you make it yourself or you buy frozen or buy bone broth protein, you're balancing your protein. But also what is absolutely amazing is that you are facilitating detoxification and not contributing to your protein load. In fact, if you look back in research, you are not even contributing what they would call daily value of protein when you consume collagen-rich proteins. You could, if you look at bone broth protein, we don't say 20 grams of protein is 40% of the daily value because daily value is made on proteins that helped baby chicks grow into chickens. Methionine is the amino acid that is the number one supplement for all chicken feed. So who cares about that?
When you say methionine protein and then you've got the more connective tissue building protein. So are you putting, vegan and whey protein in the methionine?
Absolutely. They're all the same. I don't care if you consume pea protein, rice protein, hemp protein, soy protein, whey protein, beef or egg. They are all the same. And in fact, you'll see, well, our rice is almost as good as whey. What does that mean? It almost has as much methionine as whey. Bone broth proteins are entirely different. They balance out methionine. So you and I'm getting chills because it's such a revelation. We don't like the way that the China study has influenced people, correct?
Right.
Because they'll say that you who eat animal foods, you're idiots. You're killing people. Jay, I truly believe
Series of observations should be the title instead of China study.
Well, but listen to this though. I do believe that the way we eat protein in industrialized, modernized countries has a lot to do with, it's not animal versus plant. It's because in animal proteins, when you eat food, you get a very small amount. It's the amount of methionine-based proteins in relation to the proline and glycine. It balances it out. There's even an online article about a cancer-starving diet that is methionine, it's eliminates methionine, and it's an all-fruit diet. But guess what you and I know about that?
Sugar.
Sugar feeds cancer.
Yeah.
There's a way to lower your methionine levels that's a non-sugar way, and it's bone broth. And there's a way to imagine if you're on a ketogenic diet, you want electrolytes. We don't think that sodium chloride and magnesium sulfate are the best forms of minerals to take, but we don't want coconut water because it's high carb, or we don't want juices. Imagine if you have something like bone broth with 0 carbs, but loaded with electrolytes.
Yeah, no sugar, but electrolytes.
It's an absolute breakthrough. And so what do we do with bone broth protein? We have a pre-workout electrolyte, 0 sugar. And we have a meal replacement with 2 grams of sugar coming from flaxseed and whatever. Yeah. We've got protein powders with 0 grams of sugar. We've got fitness proteins with 0 grams of sugar. And it's not because we're boosting it with artificial sweeteners, etc. Even pea proteins or rice proteins have 2 to 4 grams of carbs. And let's face it, and I don't know how you feel, but when I consume a pea protein, which is very rare, it's the equivalent of eating like 10 pounds of peas. I don't feel good afterwards.
Yeah, it's like a gas bloaty for me.
Bone broth protein's like I just drank water, but maybe even better. Okay. So I can go on, but this is so much more than just a product. So it's a solution.
I have to ask you, because when I saw the bone broth protein, I'm like, well, is that just collagen or like gelatin? Because I've been using, collagen for years, in smoothies and shakes and those kind of things. So what's the difference between like a collagen or a gelatin versus like a bone broth protein?
Well, these are a couple facts, and this is not on the label. We don't talk about this all the time, but just, important for people to know who ask. Bone broth protein is approximately 60 to 65% collagen. Okay. The majority is collagen type 2. Now, we also tested various types of bone broth protein powders that we've made: beef, turkey, and chicken. Chicken's extraordinary. Not because chicken's better than turkey or beef, it's because of the parts of the chicken that we use in the broth, which they call it in the industry frames, which is primarily rib cage and sternum. That gives an extraordinary amount of chondroitin, glucosamine, hyaluronic acid.
Okay.
Beef has nearly 50 times less. Turkey has nearly 50 times less, maybe 100. And that's surprising because it's now you could get lamb broth using the sternum, but that's not, when we make beef broth and lamb broth, we get leg bones, etc. So that's more of a broth lesson. So bone broth protein, about 60 to 65% collagen, which gives you more collagen than any collagen supplement per serving. That's pretty cool, right?
That's amazing.
The other thing is bone broth protein comes from the bones of chicken that our parents and grandparents would use in a soup. Collagen comes from the hooves and hides of cows. And I know a lot about this because I own a beef and multi-species processing center. The hides and hooves require some processing, pretty significant, to get them to be suitable for collagen. They contain type 1 and type 3, and you can consume too much. They can lead to bone malformation, etc. Bone broth protein is broth. Yeah. We make broth, it's a liquid, then it becomes a powder. It's dried, pure, with no additives. Collagen is a process where they're grinding down the collagen substances. Wow. Very different. So I'm not a hater of collagen by any stretch. I think it's good in gelatin. But when you do bone broth protein, you're getting naturally hydrolyzed type 2 collagen because the cooking process produces hydrolysis. You're getting enough chondroitin that would be a clinically studied dose. Hyaluronic acid, same thing. Collagen, same thing. And it's very versatile. You're not going to add your regular collagen powder to rice. But so I think bone broth protein is multiple times better than collagen. It's more complete. And as I talked about, 65% is collagen, but there's 25% additional non-collagen amino acids. So you get a little bit of that sort of muscle building effect. And it just goes so well. Now with capsules, there's just nobody that has bone broth unavailable to them. And for a year, Jay, and this is the first time in my life, for a year I've consumed 2 to 3 servings of bone broth a day. And that never would have happened. We're in a hotel room.
Yeah.
So this morning I've had 2 servings with my shaker cup and my bone broth protein.
Well, I know I tell my wife, I'm like, let's get some bone broth going, and then 24 hours later it's ready, and then you're put it in the fridge, and it was a lifesaver for her. When our daughter was born, and you know the story of daughter was born and the bottom fell out, she was literally reacting to every single food, and the only thing she consumed, it was probably 17 days straight, was bone broth. That was a savior for her.
Absolutely.
And I wonder how she would have done with the protein,
Well, it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah.
And part of it is when you're making food like that, the purchasing, the preparation, there's a lot of stress when you're someone who is desperate to be able to just shake something in seconds. It is a lifesaver in many instances. And look, I'll be very clear. I do believe we need animal protein and plant protein in our diets. But why the heck would we supplement with the stuff we're already getting? I eat eggs. I eat clean meats. I eat good dairy. I eat some seeds, legumes, and grains. Why am I going to go out and consume processed proteins from the very same things I'm already getting? It makes no sense.
It's better diversity then.
Absolutely. Supplement with what you don't get.
Yeah.
And what you don't get is bone. The people watching this video, 95% of them, even if they've heard you talk about bone broth, they don't get it every day. Now they can. There's no excuses. And taste isn't an issue. My kids love the flavored ones. My wife likes the flavored ones too, different ones. Yep. Warm cinnamon apples like apple cider. Turmeric's my favorite. Greens is amazing. Bone broth to the people. That's what this is about. And we're going to do it until we can't do it no more.
That's awesome. Well, I hope this helps sum up this bone broth protein thing you're seeing all over the place and people talking about it. I obviously had some deep questions, especially in the gelatin collagen world, so I appreciate you answering that. I know we'll have you on future podcasts. We're going to talk more about your story and health and things, but I really I'm like, give me the lowdown here on this bone broth, because I
gave you some behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So appreciate your time, and check out Jordan Rubin. What's a good reference or resource?
So if you want to check out either draxe.com with my partner, Dr. Josh Axe, or ancientnutrition.com, and you'll get great information on bone broth protein. We even have a book called Bone Broth Breakthrough that you can download.
Awesome. So check that out. We'll put that links on the podcast notes as well, drjdavidson.com/podcast, and then we'll also have the links on the YouTube as well. So be blessed, and we'll see you on the next podcast. And again, thank you, Jordan.
Appreciate it, Jay.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode or found it valuable, please leave positive feedback, as it will get the message out to those searching for answers to their health issues. You can find more information and resources at drjdavidson.com. That's DRJAY Davidson.com. drjdavidson.com.